The fork hit the plate, not hard, just stopped. Samson Anderson Belmont set it down with the kind of stillness that made everyone in the room hold their breath without knowing why. He had taken one bite, a single, deliberate bite of the pan-seared sea bass with the saffron reduction and herb crust. And now he was sitting back in his chair, fingers pressed flat against the white tablecloth, staring at nothing. The restaurant was called Orem, 52 tables, a 3-year waiting list. The kind of place where a glass of water came with a story about the mountain it was sourced from. Tonight, the main dining hall was full. Quiet conversations between people with too much money and too little urgency. Soft gold light. String quartet in the corner. The low, careful hum of a room that knew how to behave itself. Samson had not spoken in 40 seconds. His assistant, Derek, noticed first. He stopped mid-sentence in his own conversation and watched his employer's face. Then the table captain noticed. Then the sommelier. Then, like a slow wave rolling from one end of the room to the other, a quiet awareness spread through the staff that something had shifted. Samson was not a man people ignored. He was 51 years old, built like someone who had fought his way into money rather than inherited it, with close-cropped silver hair and eyes the color of deep water. He ran Belmont Capital, $3 billion in assets, offices in 6 countries, a reputation that arrived in a room before he did. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. People adjusted themselves around him, the way furniture got moved when a large object entered a space. He had been invited to Orem by the restaurant's owner, Claude Whitmore, who was trying to secure a business partnership and believed that a good meal would soften the ground. Samson had agreed to dinner. He had not agreed to be impressed. He lifted his eyes slowly and looked across the table at Claude. "Who made this dish?" Claude blinked. Chef Laurent personally." "Who made this dish?" he asked again. The repetition was not louder, it was quieter. And that was somehow worse. Claude reached for his phone under the table. Across the room, near the kitchen entrance, the table captain had already slipped through the swing door. Inside the kitchen, the message moved fast. Chef Laurent, head chef, James Beard nominee, was a man who had never once been questioned about his food in 11 years, looked up from his station and felt something cold move through him. He wiped his hands on his apron, straightened his jacket, and walked out. The dining room watched him cross the floor. He was a tall man, lean, with the kind of posture that came from years of commanding a kitchen. He stopped at Samson's table and gave a short professional nod. "Mr. Belmont, I'm Chef Laurent. I personally oversaw tonight's menu." Samson looked at him. "Did you make this dish?" "I supervised." "That's not what I asked." Laurent kept his expression steady. "Every dish leaving my kitchen is my responsibility." Samson picked up the fork again. He cut a small piece of the fish, lifted it, held it near his mouth for a moment, then placed it back down without eating it. "This recipe," he said slowly, "does not belong to you." The table went very still. Laurent's jaw tightened. "Mr. Belmont, I designed this menu myself. The saffron reduction is a technique I developed. The reduction is fine." Samson's voice was flat. "The herb crust is what I'm talking about. That combination, the way the rosemary is balanced against the lemon thyme, the ratio of breadcrumb to zest, the salt timing, that is not a restaurant technique. That is a home recipe." He paused. "Someone who learned to cook in a kitchen with no audience made this." Laurent said nothing. Samson was right, and Laurent did not know why. Behind the kitchen door, the staff had pressed themselves toward the small, circular window, watching. There were 11 of them on tonight's shift: prep cooks, line cooks, the pastry team, the runners. And in the far corner, near the pass-through window, where finished plates waited to be carried out, stood Mary Anderson. She was holding a clean folded cloth in both hands, the way a person holds something when they need to keep their hands busy. She was 26, slight, with dark eyes that moved constantly, watching the room, reading the tables, tracking which glass was half empty before the guests noticed. She had been at Aram for 2 years. Most guests did not know her name, and she preferred it that way. She was watching Chef Laurent's back through the circular window. She knew exactly what had happened, and her heart was beating so fast she could feel it in her throat. Samson looked past Laurent, past Claude, past the politely frozen faces of the other diners, and let his gaze travel toward the kitchen doors, slowly, as if he was following something he couldn't quite see. "Bring me whoever was on the herb station tonight," he said. Claude leaned forward. "Mr. Belmont, I assure you that Chef Laurent, I'm not interested in assurances." Samson folded his hands on the table. "Bring me the person who made this dish." Inside the kitchen, the table captain turned around. He scanned the room. The prep cooks looked at the floor. The line cooks looked at each other. And then every single pair of eyes, one by one, drifted toward the corner, toward Mary. She did not move. The table captain walked toward her slowly, the way a person approaches something that might startle. He stopped a foot away and lowered his voice. "Did you touch Mr. Belmont's plate?" Mary's grip tightened on the cloth. "Did you touch it?" he repeated. She looked through the circular window at the dining room, at Chef Laurent standing stiff and uncertain, at the billionaire who was sitting perfectly still, waiting with the patience of someone who had never once not gotten an answer. She exhaled. "I did." The table captain closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he straightened up and pushed through the kitchen door. Mary had not planned it. That needed to be said, not as an excuse, but as the truth. She had not walked into that kitchen tonight with any intention of touching the Belmont order. She knew who Samson Belmont was. Everyone did. She had read the articles, the profiles, the comment sections where people argued about whether he was brilliant or brutal or both. She had zero desire to be anywhere near his table. But at 7:42 p.m., the kitchen had collapsed. Not literally, but in the way kitchens collapse, suddenly all at once, without warning. 3 orders backed up at the hot station. A sauce broke. A new runner dropped a tray and shattered 2 plates of halibut. Chef Laurent was on the far end of the kitchen, yelling about the timing on a table of 8. And the prep cook handling the Belmont order, a young guy named Theo, who had only been there 6 weeks, had looked at the herb crust tray and gone completely blank. Mary had been standing 2 feet away, waiting for her plates to run. She watched Theo freeze. She watched the seconds tick. She watched the Belmont plate sitting unfinished on the pass while the entire kitchen burned around it. She put down her tray and moved to the station. Her hands found the herbs before her mind had finished deciding. Rosemary, lemon thyme. Well, she had watched Laurent make this dish a dozen times, but the ratio he used had always seemed off to her. Too heavy on the rosemary, not enough acid to cut through the oil. So her hands did what they knew, what they had always known. She adjusted. She finished the crust. She placed the fish under the lamp for exactly 40 seconds. She plated it, handed it to Theo, and walked away. That had been 40 minutes ago, and now the most powerful man in the room was asking for her by name. The kitchen door swung open. The table captain stepped back through and looked at Mary. He gestured toward the door with his head. She set down the folded cloth, smoothed her apron with both hands, and walked to the door, pushed it open, and stepped into the dining room. The light in the dining room felt different from the kitchen side, warmer, more deliberate. Mary had carried plates through that door hundreds of times, but she had never walked through it the way she was walking now, slowly, with every eye in the building on her. She stopped beside Chef Laurent. He looked at her with an expression she could not fully read. Confusion mostly, and something else, something closer to concern. Samson Belmont looked at her. Not the way men usually looked at her, past her, through her, around her. He looked at her the way he had looked at the dish, like there was something worth examining. Sir, the table captain said quietly, this is Mary. She's one of our— You can go, Samson said coldly. The table captain hesitated. Go, Samson repeated. He left. Samson did not stop him. To the billionaire and the waitress were now the show center of a room that was pretending very hard not to watch. Samson gestured to the empty chair across from him. Mary shook her head once. I'm on shift, sir. He looked at her. A long pause. Sit down, he ordered flatly. She sat. Samson did not speak immediately. He had a habit of letting silence do the work that most people use words for. He looked at Mary the way he reviewed a contract, carefully without rushing, looking for the thing that didn't fit. Mary kept her hands flat on her thighs under the table. She was not going to fidget in front of this man. She had grown up learning not to show discomfort to people who were watching for it. You made the herb crust, Samson said finally. It wasn't a question. Yes. Not Laurent. No. Why? Mary kept her voice even. The kitchen was backed up. The prep cook on the station was too occupied. The plate was going to be late. So you stepped in? I finished the order. Samson tilted his head slightly. You changed the recipe. Mary said nothing. Ajkal, Laurent's ratio is heavier on the rosemary, Samson said. You pulled it back, added more lemon thyme, adjusted the salt timing. I'd guess you salted before the lamp, not after. Mary looked at him carefully. Before, 30 seconds under heat after salting lets it settle into the crust instead of sitting on top. Something shifted in Samson's face, a flicker of recognition. Where did you learn that? He asked. Home, Mary said. Who taught you? She paused for exactly 1 second. My mother. Samson's fingers, which had been resting loosely on the tablecloth, went very still. Mary didn't notice. She was looking at the dish. My mother said salt is a conversation, not a command. You put it on too late. You're shouting at the food. You put it on at the right moment you're listening to it. Mom, the string quartet in the corner shifted into something slower. A few tables away, a couple laughed softly about something private. The room breathed around them, ordinary and unaware. Samson was not breathing ordinarily. He picked up his water glass, took a slow sip, and set it back down with the precision of a man buying himself time. Your mother cooked like this? He continued. She cooked better than this, Mary answered. There was no pride in it, just fact. What else did she make? Samson asked again. Mary frowned slightly. This was not the conversation she had expected. She had expected anger. Consequences. The kind of meeting where someone gets dismissed in careful, expensive language. Not this, not a billionaire asking her about her mother's cooking with an expression she couldn't place. Why does that matter? Yatham, she asked. Samson met her eyes. Humor me. Mary considered him for a moment. Then she said, my mother can make a groundnut soup that could make you forget you were hungry. Jollof rice that never burned, even when everything else on the stove was on fire. She paused, and she had her way with fish. She always said fish was the most honest ingredient in the kitchen. You can't hide bad technique with fish. It shows everything. Samson set down his water glass. Your mother, he said slowly. What was her name? The question landed differently than the others, heavier, like he already knew the shape of the answer and was bracing for it. Mary looked at him. Why? What was her name? Patti repeated. There was a beat of silence. Grace, Mary said. Grace Anderson. The dining room kept moving. Plates arrived at tables. Wine was poured. The quartet played on. None of it reached Samson Belmont. He sat completely motionless, and for the first time since he had walked into Orem that evening, he looked like a man who had been caught off guard. Not surprise. Grace Anderson, he repeated. His voice was barely above a murmur. Mary watched his face change. It was subtle, the way weather changes before you can name it. Something drained out of his expression, and something else moved in to take its place. She didn't know what to call it. It sat somewhere between grief and recognition. "Did you know her?" Mary asked. Samson didn't answer immediately. He reached for the fork again. He cut another small piece of the fish and held it for a moment, then set it down again. He seemed to be deciding something, not about the food and not about her, about himself. "Is she still alive?" and he asked. The question hit Mary somewhere soft. She looked down at the table. "No," she said. "She passed 4 years ago." Another lingering silence. "I'm sorry," Samson said. And the strange thing, the thing that Mary would think about later, alone in her apartment, was that it didn't sound like politeness. It sounded like loss. She looked up at him, really looked. Beneath the silver hair, in the expensive suit, in the reputation that walked into rooms before he did, there was something else. Something that had just been disturbed, like a stone dropped into still water, and the rings were still moving. "How did you know her?" Mary asked. Samson was quiet for a long moment. In the kitchen, through the small circular window, 3 of the staff were still watching. At the bar, one of the sommelier had stopped pretending to polish glasses. Claude Whitmore was sitting at the host stand with his phone in his hand, not using it. "We grew up in the same neighborhood," Samson said finally. "A long time ago, before any of this." He gestured vaguely at the room around them, the gold light, the linen, all of it. "She was the first person who ever cooked for me. Not in a restaurant, not for an occasion, just because I was there because I was hungry." Mary kept very still. "She made jollof rice," Samson said, "and fish, on a small stove in a small kitchen. And she talked the entire time she cooked, about flavor, about timing, about how food was a language, and most people never bothered to learn it properly." He paused. "I've eaten in 43 countries. Well, I have spent more money on food than most people earn in a lifetime." He looked at the dish. "I have not tasted that in 27 years. Mary's hands tightened on her lap. "You left," she said quietly. It wasn't an accusation, it was an observation, but it landed like something sharper. Samson looked at her. "I left," he confirmed. No defense in it, no explanation offered. "She never talked about her past," Mary said. "Not to me, not about people." She paused. "She talked about food. She talked about me. She talked about the future like it was something she was building with her hands." Her voice was steady. "She didn't talk about people who left." Samson absorbed that without flinching. He owed her that much, to let it land fully, without deflecting. "How old are you?" he asked. 26. He said nothing. But something moved across his face, quick, sharp, like a calculation he hadn't wanted to make. Mary saw it. She frowned. "What?" "Nothing," he said. "That wasn't nothing." Samson looked at her for a long moment. His jaw was tight. His eyes were doing something complicated. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed his phone. He opened it, scrolled for a moment, then placed it face up on the table and slid it toward her. Mary looked down. It was a photograph. Old, scanned from a physical print, slightly faded at the edges. 2 people standing outside a building she didn't recognize. A young woman laughing mid-turn, like the photo had caught her by surprise. And a young man beside her, watching her laugh instead of looking at the camera. Mary's chest tightened. She knew that laugh. She knew the angle of those shoulders. She knew the way that woman stood. Weight on the left foot, chin slightly lifted, completely unguarded. She had seen that woman every single day for the first 22 years of her life. She pushed the phone back toward him slowly. Her voice, when it came, was very quiet. "Where did you get that?" "I've carried it for years," Samson said, "in different phones, different lives." He picked it up and looked at it for a moment before putting it away. "I never knew how to find her, and then I stopped trying. Because I told myself it was too late. He paused. It was a coward's logic. Mary only stared at him. She said nothing. I left because I was 24 and terrified. Samson continued. I had nothing. I had a plan and a bus ticket and the idea that if I went and made something of myself, I could come back and it would mean something, that it would matter more. He stopped. By the time it mattered, too much time had passed. I didn't know if she'd want to hear from me. I didn't know if she'd moved on. I told myself she had. He looked at Mary directly. I was wrong to leave. I knew it then. I have known it every year since. Mary looked at him. She was thinking about her mother, about the small apartment they'd shared, the two of them, through her entire childhood, about how Grace Anderson had worked 2 jobs and never once complained, about how she had sung while she cooked and laughed too loudly at her own jokes and told Mary every single day, that she was loved, about how she had never once mentioned a young man with a bus ticket and a plan. She raised me alone, Mary said. I know. You didn't know she was pregnant. It wasn't a question either, but Samson heard what it was. He looked at her. The calculation that had crossed his face earlier, the one he hadn't wanted to make, was back, still and certain now. Mary, he said carefully, how old did you say you were? 26. He was quiet. She was already pregnant when you left, Mary said. Her voice had gone very flat the way surfaces go when there's too much pressure underneath. She never told you. Samson's hands were pressed against the table. He was looking at her face, really looking, the way he should have been looking from the beginning. The shape of her jaw, the set of her eyes, the way she held herself under pressure, still and careful and giving nothing away, the same way he did. She never told me, he said, not as a question, on a confirmation, an understanding that was arriving 26 years too late, in a restaurant full of people who had no idea what was happening at this table. Mary stood up, her chair scraped back quietly. She straightened her apron. She looked at Samson Belmont, at this man who had a photograph in his phone and grief in his voice and 26 years of absence between them. And she held herself very, very still. I need to get back to work, she said. Mary, I need to get back to work, she repeated. And she walked back toward the kitchen. Don't go anywhere. The most wonderful moment of this story is ahead of you. If this hit different, smash that like button right now. The kitchen received her like it always did, loud, hot, indifferent to whatever had just happened on the other side of that door. Orders were being called. Plates were moving. Theo was back at his station, recovered, focused, pretending he hadn't been the reason any of this started. Mary picked up her tray. Her hands were steady. She had learned that from her mother, too. How to keep your hands steady when everything else was shaking. Grace Anderson had been a woman who cried in the shower and laughed at the table and never once let the two bleed into each other. Mary had inherited that discipline the way other people inherited eye color. Automatically, without choosing it, she ran 3 tables in the next 12 minutes, refilled water, described the dessert menu to a couple who couldn't decide. He smiled at a child who was sitting too formally in his chair and clearly hated it. She did all of it on the outside of herself, the practiced, competent surface that had gotten her through 2 years at Orem and 26 years before that. Inside, she was completely still, the way a room goes still after a door slams. She had known in some formless way for most of her life that her father existed somewhere. Grace had never lied about it. When Mary was 7 and asked directly, her mother had sat down across from her at their small kitchen table, the one with the wobbly left leg they never fixed, and said simply, "He left before he knew about you. That's the whole story, baby. The rest is ours." And she had said it with such finality, such peace that Mary had accepted it and moved on. Children accept the shape of their world. But it is only later that they measure it. She had measured it sometimes. Late nights, hard weeks, the particular loneliness of watching other people's fathers at school events, at graduations, at the ordinary, unremarkable moments that add up to a life. She had measured it and then put it away because Grace had taught her that an absent person takes up exactly as much space as you give them. And Mary had chosen to give that space to other things. She had not expected him to be here, in this restaurant, at that table. She had not expected him to taste the food and know. Chef Laurent appeared at her elbow between tables. His voice was low. "My office, when you have a moment. I'm on the floor, Mary." His tone wasn't angry, and it surprised her. She handed her tray to another runner and followed him. By his office was a narrow room off the back corridor. Filing cabinet, a desk buried under supplier invoices, a cork board with the week's menu drafted in red marker. He closed the door and turned to face her. "Are you all right?" he asked. She looked at him. "Yes." "What happened out there?" He recognized the recipe. Mary answered firm and flat. Laurent folded his arms. "He said more than that?" "Yeah." He waited, then exhaled slowly. "I'm not going to ask you to explain yourself. What you did tonight, stepping in on that order, I should have been angry about it. Technically, you went outside your role." He paused. "But the plate was perfect. And whatever is happening at that table right now, I don't think it's about the food anymore." Mary looked at the corkboard, at the week's menu in red marker: salmon, lamb, sea bass with saffron reduction and herb crust. "He knew my mother," she said finally. Laurent stayed quiet and shocked. How can the great Belmont know the mother of this low-class waitress? They were close, a long time ago. Mary stopped. She was not ready to say the rest of it out loud. Not here, not in this narrow office under fluorescent light with invoices piled on the desk. Some things needed more space than that. It was unexpected. Laurent nodded slowly. "Take the rest of the night." "I'm fine. I know you're fine. Take the rest of the night anyway." He moved to the door and opened it. And Mary, for what it's worth, that dish was the best thing that has left this kitchen in a long time. The ratio you used on the herb crust. He shook his head once. "Your mother taught you well." Mary looked at him. Something tightened behind her eyes. She held it. "Thank you, Chef," she said, and she walked out. She did not go home immediately. She sat in the small staff room at the back of the building, a room with plastic chairs and a folding table and a microwave that hummed too loudly. She put her hands flat on her knees, breathed. She thought about her mother. Grace Anderson had been 53 years old when she died. A stroke, quiet and sudden, on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Mary had been 22 and just starting to understand how much she didn't know about the woman who had raised her. She had been building a list of questions, the kind you save for later, for a slower season, for when there is more time. She had never asked them. There was no more time, and the questions had stayed questions, unanswered and accumulating. But now one of them had walked into the restaurant where she worked and ordered the sea bass. She heard the staff room door open, but she did not look up. She assumed it was Laurent or one of the other runners coming to collect their things. "May I come in?" She looked up. Samson Belmont was standing in the doorway. He had removed his jacket. He was now holding it folded over one arm, and without it, he looked different. Less like a headline, more like a person. His shirt was white, slightly creased at the sleeves. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Mary stared at him. "How did you get back here? You can't be back here." "I know." Samson didn't move. "I won't stay. I needed to say something before you left." Mary looked at him for a long moment. Then she gestured at the plastic chair across from her. He sat, then placed his jacket carefully over his knee. He looked around the small room, the humming microwave, the folding table, the staff schedule pinned crookedly to the wall. with the expression of a man recalibrating something. I was not a good person when I was young, he said. I want to be clear about that. I'm not going to sit here and reframe it or explain it into something softer. I was ambitious in a way that ate everything else. People, relationships, promises. He paused. Your mother was the best person I knew, and I left her because I was convinced that what I was running toward was more important than what I was leaving behind. He looked at Mary directly. I was wrong. That is the simplest way I know to say it. I was wrong. Mary held his gaze. She never spoke badly of you. She never spoke of you at all, which I think was its own kind of grace. Samson absorbed that. Yes, he said quietly, it was. She built a whole life, Mary continued. She built me. She worked 2 jobs for years, and she cooked every night, and she laughed every day, and she never once made me feel like something was missing. Her voice stayed level. She was her mother's daughter. Whatever you left, she filled it. She more than filled it. I believe you, Samson said. I'm not saying it to hurt you. I know. He looked at his hands. I'm saying I believe you because it sounds exactly like her. She never needed anyone to complete anything. She completed things herself. He stayed quiet for a moment. She would have been extraordinary. She was extraordinary, Mary concluded. The present tense first, then corrected. She is. The microwave hummed. Somewhere down the corridor, the kitchen was finishing its last orders. The restaurant was winding down. Chairs going up on tables in the front room, glasses being carried to the bar. I don't know what you want from me, Mary said. I don't know what you expect this conversation to be. I don't expect anything, Samson said. I gave up the right to expectations a long time ago. Then why are you here? He thought about it carefully. She appreciated that he didn't answer immediately, didn't reach for something polished. He actually thought about it. Because I tasted that dish, he said finally, and for one moment I was 24 years old in a small kitchen and someone was teaching me that salt is a conversation, not a command. Oh, and I have spent every year since then running from how much I left behind in that kitchen. He looked at her, and then I looked up, and the person who cooked it was sitting across from me, and she had Grace's hands and Grace's stillness. And I couldn't just let it be a coincidence and go home. Mary looked at him for a long time. She was thinking about the list of questions she had never gotten to ask. She was thinking about the wobbly kitchen table and the small stove and the way her mother sang slightly off-key to no one in particular while the fish cooked. She was thinking about 26 years and what they contained, the weight of them, the fullness of them, all the things that had grown in the space a leaving had made. She was thinking that grief was strange, that it didn't arrive in straight lines. That she had grieved her father's absence as a child and thought she had finished with it. And here it was again, wearing a different shape. Not absence now, but presence, which was somehow harder. I'm not looking for a father, she said, gently but clearly. I had a mother. She was enough. She was more than enough. I understand, Samson said, and I'm not interested in what you've built, the money, the business. None of that changes what the years were. I know. So I need you to understand what you're actually asking for, Mary said. Because if you're sitting in this plastic chair in a staff room asking me to make peace with something, that's a long road. And I don't know if I want to walk it. I don't know you, and learning someone at 26 who should have been there at 0 is a different thing entirely. Samson nodded. It is. But, she paused. He looked up. Mary took a slow breath. She looked at the wall, at the staff schedule, at the week's menu written in someone else's handwriting. She thought about her mother, about what Grace Anderson would do in a room like this, what she would say. Grace would make tea, she thought. Grace would make tea, and she would sit down and she would say, start from the beginning and let's see what's actually here. My mother believed that most broken things could be talked through, Mary said. She believed that sitting at a table together was the beginning of almost every solution. She paused. I don't know if that's true for this. I genuinely don't know, but I think she would be angry with me if I walked out of this room without at least asking the first question. Samson stayed very still. What's the first question? Mary looked at him. Tell me about her, she said. When she was young, when you knew her, tell me something about my mother that I don't already know. Something broke open in Samson Belmont's face. Not dramatically. Not the way things break in movies. The way things break when they have been held closed for a very long time and the hand finally, quietly lets go. He sat forward and rested his elbows on the folding table, then began to talk. He told her about a Saturday market in the early morning, about Grace haggling with a fish seller and winning, and then giving the man back the difference because she decided he needed it more. He told her about the way she described flavor like it was geography. This spice is from the north of something. This technique is from the coast. He told her about the small kitchen and the wobbly table, and Mary's breath caught at that because, of course, it was the same table. Of course, Grace had carried it with her, and how Grace had said the very first time she cooked for him that a meal made with real attention was the closest thing to prayer she knew. Mary listened. Her hands were still in her lap. Her eyes were bright. Outside, the restaurant finished closing. The lights in the dining room dimmed. The staff moved through their end-of-night routines. Familiar, quiet, automatic. In the small back room with the humming microwave and the plastic chairs, a conversation that was 26 years overdue kept going. Not solving everything, not pretending the years hadn't been years, but beginning honestly and carefully, the way her mother would have wanted, with a table between them and the truth on it. And somewhere in the room, in the air, in the space between the words, if you were the kind of person who believed in such things, there was the faint memory of a small kitchen. A woman singing slightly off-key, the smell of fish and lemon thyme and rosemary balanced just right, food made with real attention, the closest thing to prayers she knew. If this story moved you even a little, you already know what to do. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Drop in the comments. Who did you feel for most? Mary, Samson, or Grace? Let us know. We read every single one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.